Hello, fellow mortals, and welcome to my podcast that I have not named yet. But my name is Lauren the Mortician, and this is my very, very first podcast episode, and I'm here with my sister, Caitlyn.
Hello.
What this podcast is about is death, dying, child safety, and whatever the heck else I want to talk about. My goal in life, which I have found really to become quite passionate about, is normalizing death and talking about death. So I thought, what better to have a first podcast episode than with my sister, who has also grown up around death her entire life.
Yes, but I did not go into that line of work.
No, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. So yeah, I thought we could just start right into it. I get asked quite often on my channel and on my platform, how did you get into this? How did you become a funeral director, a mortician? And I think a lot of us in this line of work will agree. Everybody wants to know the story. Like there should always be a backstory. They want to know, like, okay, why did you decide to help the dead and work with the dead? And what is that like? So how that all started really is our childhood, growing up in the funeral home.
Yep.
Now, I don't even know how many months we are apart because I'm 30.
I'm 28.
And you're 28, but I don't think it's too old. Is it? Is it 2 years and I don't know. We don't know.
It's 2 years and 2 months.
We don't do math. She's a paralegal.
Yeah. Yes.
She does. I don't even know what you do. You do really smart stuff, but we don't do math.
Yes. No, not interested in math.
No, not even a little bit. I like science. So when our parents bought the funeral home, I was 9 months old and you weren't born yet.
I wasn't even a thought.
You weren't even a thought. Well, I wasn't a thought either. I was an uh-oh baby.
You were surprised.
I was at the wedding.
Yes.
For my parents in my mama's belly. But yeah, I was 9 months old. My parents bought the funeral home. And then Caitlyn came along a couple of years after. And I thought this would be such an interesting first episode because I have actually never sat down with my sister and talked to her about growing up in the funeral home.
No.
We've never talked about it.
No.
We were talking about this briefly before.
Yeah.
I don't even know why.
I don't know. I think it's just because we were so accustomed to what kind of came with the lifestyle and the experiences and stuff. And so we kind of experienced it together and probably just figured, what's there to talk about, I guess.
And you know what people think is so weird is that death is just so normal.
It's
normal. It was just a part of our childhood growing up.
Right.
I guess is what you'd say.
Yep.
And I came up with some questions to ask you. Did you come up with some to ask me about growing up? If that's okay. Hold on. I don't know why. You know where I came up with these questions, like for you, was these are sometimes what I get asked when I tell people we grew up in a funeral home. So do you remember the first dead body you ever saw at the funeral home? That's a tough question. And if you don't have an answer to that, I totally understand that.
I do not remember the first dead body I saw at the funeral home.
Do you remember realizing what death was? Do you remember?
Yes, I do remember that. Our parents had a book. What was that book called?
The Next Place?
Yes. And once we hit a certain age, our parents read that book to us. And that really helped explain what death is, where people go, how it all comes together. And then when we would be around bodies or funerals or families, we understood how it all worked and why our parents did what they did.
So I remember that book.
Yes.
I remember reading that book. So like when we go into the funeral home and like the dead they're just around, what people want to know is if you think that's weird.
No. It was never weird because the way it was kind of explained and taught to us is that as a mortician, you are there to help families in a time when they need it most and be that support and just kind of hold their hand and help guide them through such a heartbreaking and hard time.
Yeah.
So I don't ever remember it feeling weird or odd. It was just normal. Hey, we're going to the funeral home. Let's go play in the funeral home and play hide and seek in the casket room.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I like to tell people that when we were growing up, we had like this really big parking lot, and because it's a funeral home, it's got to be a lot of parking. And so that's where we learned how to ride our bikes and our trikes. Yep. And we had little motorized cars, like with the little tykes, like cars that we would drive. And I don't know if people think that's morbid, but it was like driving around in the funeral home parking lot and like learning how to do all that. But that was just our life, because we, so how the funeral home is set up, even to this day, like there's the funeral home. And then our house that we grew up in was a duplex, and it was right next door to the funeral home. Mm-hmm. And when I tell people this, they're normally like, you did what? But so the duplex that we lived in was actually the original funeral home. And we lived in the lower level where they used to have the funerals. Mm-hmm. They used to embalm people in the basement. We that's where we grew up. Like our bedrooms, they used to meet families in those rooms.
For some reason, I do not remember knowing the embalming part.
Yeah, that was the funeral home. That was the funeral. Oh, okay.
That's why it was always so creepy in that basement.
It was always really creepy in the basement.
The only happy thing down there was our mom used to paint those little ceramic piggy banks and sculptures, and we'd always get excited to go down there just to see those. But otherwise, it was creepy.
Yeah, there was a reason it was so creepy. That's where they did the embalmings.
Okay,
and we lived there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess that makes sense. Where else would they have done the embalming?
I don't know. Not upstairs. I hope not, because that'd mean it was in my bedroom or something.
Right.
Yeah. That'd be a little too close for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where we lived. That's where we grew up. And my dad would just walk out the front door and then walk over to work every day.
And we would always try to follow him. Always. We would think we were so sneaky and so quiet behind him, but he played along with it, and then he would eventually turn around and be like, go back to the house.
Yeah, because the funeral home, so even though like our house didn't look like a funeral home inside, okay? Like it felt like a home. My mom has always made our houses feel like homes. Mm-hmm. But the funeral home next door, we always just had so much fun at the funeral home.
Yes.
Because wide open spaces, we could run around the whole building, did a big loop. And then we also played hide and go seek in the casket room.
Yep. I never crawled in a casket though, did you?
Yes.
You did.
Oh, you never crawled in one of the caskets?
No, I was too scared to go in there. I thought it would close and I would get stuck.
Okay. Do you remember the story that Dad likes to tell?
Didn't you scare the ever-living crap out of someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, who was it?
You know, this is my podcast. You can swear, right?
I know, but I don't want to offend anybody.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I scared the shit out of somebody. Actually, it was my dad. So in the 90s, all these caskets had skirts along the bottoms, and they were really ugly colored.
Yes.
So in the 90s, but really the skirts were like from the 70s and 80s. So if you can picture that, and they were like velvety, and they were the perfect hiding place. So I would sneak under the caskets, and then my dad would have a family coming in, and he'd be like, Lauren, you need to leave. You need to go back home. You know, you need to go now. And I would just wait. And he'd say, he says he could hear me go, tee hee hee. Like he could hear me under the caskets.
Yeah.
And then he would kind of like go and like try to like find which one I was under, could never. And I would grab his feet, grab his ankles to scare the shit out of him when he walked by.
I swear you scared one of the employees.
Probably. Well, that was the time I crawled in the casket and then let her open it to scare the shit out of her. Yeah.
Yes.
That was our childhood. Welcome to our childhood.
I swear I remember that. Do you remember that game we would play where one of us would be like the poison flower, and then we would chase each other around the funeral home, and if we sprayed you with the poison, you would fall and die. And the only way you could be brought back to life again was if someone else who was playing came and brought you back to life.
Oh my gosh, you're
Do you
unlocking
remember
memories. That? No, but I love how we killed each other in the game, like the funeral home.
It was if you like we would do something with our hands, and it was if you were close enough to the person and you did it with your hands and you sprayed them, they would have to drop dead.
Yep.
And we would just run around the whole funeral home from the casket room to the reception area to the chapel.
Yep.
I mean, is that what you would call it?
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. The chapel area, and then the bathrooms and the closets. I mean, it was basically, the funeral home was basically like a big loop, and you could do a circle
Yeah.
But we played that all the time.
Yeah, the funeral home was our second home. That's where we literally lived out of. We lived in right next door and in it. Like every day was an adventure.
Yeah.
I remember one of my first times really recognizing somebody who had died that our dad was caring for at the funeral home. Do you ever remember the first time?
I don't remember recognizing someone's body, but I remember recognizing family members.
Which family member? Grandma? Great-grandma?
No, not our own family members, but family members from previous funerals.
Oh,
so like
okay.
grandma passed and then grandpa passed and then
oh no,
people from town that we knew would be there. But I don't ever remember from when I was young recognizing the body of someone who had passed.
One of my friends that I grew up with, her mom had died of breast cancer. And I remember walking up to the casket. She was embalmed.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember walking up and seeing her in the casket. And it was such a surreal feeling for me to realize. I remember realizing in that moment that anybody that we know could die. Because up until that point, it seemed as a child that death was kind of something that happened to other people. That Dad was just caring for these people. And that I guess I just didn't think that ever happened to us, because as a child, it's like this thing just clicks in your head when you realize what death actually is.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting to reflect back on as an adult.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, as a kid, you see all these people that you don't necessarily recognize who have passed. And, you may recognize the people who are at the service, but I guess it's just one thing we had never really experienced firsthand as far as that goes. And, losing a family member or someone we know having to attend a funeral until we were older.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when we were younger, it just kind of seemed like, it just happens to other people.
Okay. So why didn't you become a funeral director?
I had zero interest.
Not at all? Like never? No. Never? You never thought I should do this too?
No. I never had any interest in it. I knew that it would be in my life until the day I die. So I had no interest in going into the field that I grew up around and knew that would be tied to me until I was dead myself. So I never even considered it. Also, I cannot do any gory stuff. I would never, ever be able to embalm.
Okay, so what's so funny about that is she is way bigger into true crime than I am.
Yes.
You don't do gory stuff and you watch all this true crime shit?
Yes. But, if it's seeing blood or anything like that, that doesn't bug me. But an open wound, a bone sticking out of a body, somebody's head injury, no, absolutely not. I will, even on a TV show, if they show like an injury, say someone gets shot, stabbed, whatever, and it's fake, I can't look at that stuff.
Really?
Yes. And you might have to cut this, but speaking of this,
probably not.
I went to the funeral home a couple years ago. I had to pick something up and my dad was embalming, and I was trying to find him and I couldn't find him anywhere. And eventually the only place I hadn't checked was the embalming room. Mm-hmm. I'm like, Dad, yeah, in here. So I opened the door thinking he's just doing something in there. He has the whole, the V cut. Yeah. I don't know the term. He has the whole thing open. He's like, "Hi, honey." I'm like, I had to run over to the garbage can. I thought I was going to puke.
Oh, no.
I didn't. I've never been able to get it out of my head. I wouldn't have come in and had my eyes open had I known
what you were going to walk into.
Yes. And I thought maybe he was cleaning up or, just doing something in there. And it was very traumatizing.
So you opened the door, didn't even take a step in, saw what you were looking at, and turned around and ran the other way.
Yep. And the door on the embalming room was pretty heavy, if I remember right. I mean, it's been a while since I was at the funeral home.
Yeah.
But I turned around and I got out of there and Dad was like, "What are you doing?" Like, I'm not watching that.
So you walked in and he was embalming a body that had been autopsied.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And I had never
So
I had no interest in being around embalming whatsoever, so I had never experienced that before.
So you've never seen an autopsied body after that again, other than like on TV?
No.
Okay, that's so wild.
I mean, I've seen it where you guys finish the autopsy and you stitch the body back up, but maybe 2 times. Not. I don't like being around that. I have no problem being around the body, but just being in the embalming room, I don't like it because you don't know what you're going to see with, the process. And I just
Okay, so not for you. Not for you.
No.
Not for you. Some of us are just built different.
Yeah. I have now. Growing up, I know you've mentioned this on TikTok and Instagram and different things, but we would always go on death calls with my dad growing up. Even from a young age, we would make him promise, you have to wake us up if you get a call. We want to go with you. Sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't. But then as we got older, he got better about waking us up, whether it be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And then we'd get out of bed and we'd go with him.
I think a lot of people don't realize that being a funeral director, you're on call all the time. You're on call a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And when we were growing up, we wanted to see kind of a little bit more behind the scenes of what my dad did. So you can do a ride along with a funeral director if they'll let you, but we would just wait in the car.
Yeah.
Typically. And when you're a funeral director and you're sleep deprived, because that is a really big thing, especially if you're on call, if you're embalming at all hours of the night, it is very helpful to have somebody drive with you. And I remember even after getting my driver's license, we would be driving dad around to these calls and he would be napping in the front seat.
Yeah. And we would never see anything from a young age. My dad would be the one who would go in, load up, and then we would just go back. I think it was more just kind of an excitement of being able to see that other side of, okay, this is what happens prior to the funeral. And not that it's exciting when someone passes away, but just really being able to understand everything that comes into play with the profession and, getting out at all hours of the night. I mean, there were plenty of times when I went on death calls with you.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't even live together. And she would call me and be like, hey, I'm coming up that way. You want to come with me? Sure.
People don't realize how much driving you do as a funeral director too. I mean, you are on the road, like we are road tripping. A lot of people don't die at home. They die where they hospital. And when you live out in the middle of nowhere, they hospital a couple hours away. So you have to get in the van, load up your van with your cot and your body bags, and then drive to the hospital where they die, where they're usually waiting for you down in the morgue. So it is really helpful to bring somebody with you. And we visit and we sing and we jam out to our tunes.
Yeah.
And our tunes. Oh my gosh, that was so Minnesotan.
Tunes.
Our tunes.
Yeah.
And, maybe grab a side of hot dish and then drive up to the hospital.
Some hot cocoa.
Yeah.
That was really Minnesotan.
Not the cocoa. Okay, hold on. What else do I got? Oh, he's probably not going to like us talking about this. But do you remember when Dad came home that one time? I think what a lot of people don't talk about is how emotionally draining this job can be too. And I remember growing up and seeing our dad cry and not fully understanding really why he was crying. And when he would come back in the van and he'd sit down and we'd say, Dad, why are you sad? And some of the deaths that he would have to go on were children, and children that had long blonde hair like we did or blue eyes like we did, who are young like us.
Yeah.
And that can really take an emotional toll. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I've never asked you that before.
Yes, I remember that specifically on 2 different instances.
I can only remember the one.
One was the hay bale.
One was the hay bale with the little girl with the hay bales.
Then I think, well, actually the other one, I might be thinking of one of his stories when he was a paramedic, but the skid steer.
Oh, yes.
Was that when he was a paramedic?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
When he talks about that, he still cries when he tells us about that story. Yeah.
So then it was just that one time, and I'm just remembering that the other one was from when he was a paramedic.
Yeah. Yeah. So growing up when your dad is a funeral director, it is really a unique experience, especially our dad was also a paramedic for many years. So on top of dealing with death, he also dealt with traumatic injuries. And I mean, literally, I think everything that there is to see, our dad has pretty much seen.
Right.
A lot. And growing up, we had things we weren't allowed to do, or
Yes.
we were told from a very early age, we understood what death was.
Right.
And things that we were supposed to be careful of, like heavy machinery and skid steers.
Yep.
And like when he was a paramedic and he had a call for a child who had been, whose life had been taken by a skid steer.
Right. And, you know, not only, like, for example, with Lauren, she talks about how she's the scarred mortician. Well, having a dad who wasn't only a mortician, but a paramedic for years before he was a mortician.
Yeah, we didn't get to do shit.
We didn't get to do anything fun. Those kids won't get away with shit.
We didn't get to ride four-wheelers. We didn't do shit. Like, with nothing. Like, our dad was like making sure we didn't get paralyzed. Our dad was making sure we didn't get run over.
Yeah.
And that's carried over even for me as an adult.
Right.
And what was really, really crazy for me going into this as a job was going on those types of calls that he was trying to like make us aware of when we were growing up. I went on those types of calls, 4 corner calls. Mm-hmm. And that was a really, really surreal experience and then that really shaped me into the mother that I am today. Like, oh my gosh, my dad, he wasn't crazy. He really had these things for us for a reason.
Right. Like because as a kid, you're like, well, this is shit. Why
that's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think you're invincible.
Why can't I blow up a latex balloon, Dad? It's not going to go down my throat.
Yes.
And you know, just those precautions, and that stuff does happen. Mm-hmm. And I believe it just happened, but recently or something.
It happens quite more than people realize. That's really scary. Balloons suck. We hate balloons.
Yes.
Don't let your children blow up balloons.
And even though we were very strong swimmers, because after we moved out of the funeral home house, our parents built a home on a lake. And we had always had swimming lessons from a very young age because...
We didn't really take swimming lessons that often. I remember...
Yeah, we did. We'd go to the golf course.
Well, yeah, but for like one summer, or else her parents taught us how to swim down in the lake. Do you remember that? I remember specifically learning how to swim more so than from the swimming lessons was from mom and dad teaching us how to swim.
Maybe a little. I might have been too young to remember when they taught us how to swim, because I don't have very many memories from when we first moved into that house. But I do remember going to the golf course because we would get so excited we'd get to have pizza after. Not that we didn't get to have pizza at home, but it'd be like, oh, we get to go swim and then we get to have pizza.
Did you have any near-death experiences as a child? Or was it just me that almost died like 3 times?
No, I had a near-death experience with my asthma.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. I couldn't breathe, and mom and dad were trying to do everything they could to get me to breathe. First, they put me in the shower, and they were hoping that the steam would open my airway up and allow me to breathe.
Were you having a panic attack? Was that...
No, I was having an asthma attack, but I wasn't...
Does it feel like a panic attack, I guess is what I'm asking you, because I know nothing?
No, you can't breathe.
Jeez.
Yeah. So you're trying everything you can to get air through, and you can't breathe.
Jeez.
So the steam in the shower did not work, and I just remember mom holding me. And at the time, the blue room wasn't built yet. So it was just that sliding glass door to outside. And if you were to walk out it, you would have fallen.
Yeah, yeah.
And eventually, I think it was mom. She held me because it was cold. It was wintertime. She held me by the sliding glass door to get the cold air into your lungs because cold air also helps. It's either hot steam that can kind of help open your airway, at least for me, or cold air. So they called the ambulance because I wasn't breathing well, and the ambulance went past our house.
Oh, that's right. They missed the house.
Yes, and Dad called them and was like, "You just drove by," and he's got me in the he has me in the driveway. And they got there, they loaded me up, and Dad went in the ambulance with me. Mom stayed with you two. Mm-hmm. And they gave Dad a nebulizer, and he was giving it to me, and I just remember so vividly his hands were shaking. I know it's gonna make me emotional. His hands were shaking so bad, and I had to spend the night in the hospital, and they put you in a tent that basically just blows in The nebulizer.
The nebulizer.
Albuterol.
Oh, albuterol.
Yeah, albuterol. That's what I should know what that's called. They blow in the albuterol and you're just in like literally a plastic tent.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that helped you could breathe then after?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think they only kept me in the hospital 1 or 2 nights. Mm-hmm. And then we had to do a ton of doctoring for the asthma. But other than that, I don't think I had any near-death experiences. What were yours?
Oh, I did. I almost choked and died on those cheese crackers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so I have like 3 near-death experiences. I almost choked and died on some cheesy crackers.
I forgot about that. Weren't we on the boat?
We were on the boat. Mm-hmm. I had my life jacket on. Like we were on the boat. We all had life jackets on.
Yes.
And I went to eat the cracker, inhaled the cracker into my airway.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it out. And
weren't they peanut butter ones and that's why it got stuck?
No, it was literally just like it wasn't a chunky thing.
Okay.
It was the cracker. It was probably just the cracker that got stuck up in there. Inhaled it. And I remember Mom looking at me and going, her face is turning purple. Her face is turning purple.
Oh,
because
I don't remember that.
Oh my gosh.
Block that trauma out.
I actually remember coming to a point where I knew I was going to die and accepting.
Oh my God.
That I was going to die. I remember accepting it. And it, I don't know if this will bring anybody peace, but to know that when your airway is cut off, as panicky as it is at the beginning, when it starts getting to the end, there's this like sense of calm washes over you. I know this is weird to say out loud. We've never talked about this, by the way. And I was accepting that I was going to die. I was probably 10 years old. And so I started pushing the food out of my mouth because I thought, well, maybe I'll just get it out because I still had food in my mouth. And my dad is behind me trying to do the Heimlich on me, where he's doing the back pats and he's just hitting me and hitting me and hitting me. And finally it came free. And I just remember thinking I was going to die, and then was like, and I finally got all this fresh air and I did not die because here I am.
Right.
So that was the first time I cheated death.
Yeah.
There's another time.
Like a cat with 9 lives. What's the other time?
Remember that big metal slide we used to have at the lake? We used to have this
yes. That thing was basically
it was a death trap.
And it would burn your butt if you did not run water down that thing. Get ready to have some red marks on your ass cheeks.
We had some burnt ass cheeks up at the lake.
We did.
I had my life jacket on and I didn't have the strap connected in between my legs.
Yes.
But I don't know what kind of life jacket contraption this was. But my strap was up behind my head. So like the strap that was behind where my butt should go, it went up and up my back and was behind where my neck was. So I went to jump off of the slide and the hook, the clip part for the jacket got stuck.
I remember that.
On the slide. So what happened? My life jacket came up and was strangling me and I was dangling there. And I just remember, were you there? Do you remember me hanging there, almost dying near death?
I remember something, but I don't know if I was there. I don't remember if it was explained to me after it happened or if I witnessed it. I'm not sure I remember witnessing it.
Well, I don't know who called for help because it sure as hell wasn't me. And then all of a sudden, Mom's running down the stairs like freaking bat out of hell, and gets me out of there. But I couldn't breathe. Like I'm like, and then here we go again.
Yeah. God, another time. What's the third one?
I can't remember now. Squirrel. I can't remember now, but I know there's a third one. But I actually have something I want to ask you that's totally random. But this is my podcast and we can do what I want. And while you're already emotional, okay?
Oh gosh.
You're not going to want to talk about this. My sister actually was driving down the road one day and she came upon a car accident.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was...
of course I'm talking about you.
Yes, so that was when I was...
So it wasn't a near-death experience for you, but my sister, Caitlyn, I keep saying my sister, you're literally right here. Caitlyn was driving and stopped for an accident that had just happened. And did you watch that lady die? Did you see her die?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, chills. Oh.
So I was on my way home. I don't remember if I was on my way home from work or class. And we had to take a
detour or something?
No, it was too early. No paramedics were there. But I was trained in like first aid, CPR, and all of that stuff from one of my classes.
So like set the scene. So you're driving and all of a sudden, like, did the car get T-boned?
the accident had already happened. I had just pulled up after it happened. So I'm traveling one way, I'm driving this way, and the car accident is right on the other side of the road.
So you pull over, get out, run to the car that was hit.
Yep. I get out. There were 2 or 3 people who were already there, and no one was doing anything. Oh
my gosh. They were just standing there?
Yeah, they were just standing there.
That's called the bystander effect.
Yeah. And so it was a big van, like one of those older big vans. And the way the van crashed in the front, the 2 wheels in the front went horizontal.
Okay. Okay, I can't really picture that, but okay.
Yeah, okay, so we have the front of the van, right? And both wheels were turned out. So it looked like a motorcycle had been hit.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm looking, trying to see if I see someone who is ejected from a bike. And I'm not seeing anyone. And someone pulls up and they're like, "Where's the motorcyclist?" I said, "I don't know. I don't see anyone anywhere." Turns out there was no motorcycle. The front end of the van was just so messed up that the wheels got turned out. So it literally looked like a motorcycle, but it wasn't.
So it looked like it almost was like on top of one, or like
it looked like a van had basically absorbed a motorcycle, and the wheels were right there.
Okay. So what'd you do? So
a red truck had T-boned them, and the red truck was down in the ditch. I think he had hit a tree after he hit them. Anyway, that guy was in the vehicle, and then I went over to the van, and there's an older gentleman and an older woman in the van. Now, they're husband and wife, and the husband was standing outside of the vehicle, and he's obviously freaking out.
Yeah.
He's like, and the dash was on the woman's lap. And the husband is looking at me, and I'm trying to find a pulse. And he's saying, "Is there a pulse? Is there a pulse? Is there a pulse?" And I'm in sheer panic. I was like, I can't find one. And, I'm feeling around. I'm trying to get her wrist, but I could only get to one because the other one was under the dash. Like, the dash was on her lap.
Oh.
And then I go for her neck. And obviously, she's still warm. This just happened.
Yeah.
But I remember it being very traumatizing because I had never experienced death right after it happened.
Yeah.
I had only experienced death where the body is at the funeral home and we're planning the funeral and all of that stuff. Never where a woman is in front of me and I'm trying to find her pulse, and her poor husband is just, "Did you find a pulse? Did you find a pulse?" And I'm saying I can't find one. And then he breaks down and I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. I should have said, I'm having a hard time finding one. Well, by this time, the other bystanders, most of them were men. They were trying to find a really heavy-duty stick board.
They were going to try to get her out of there?
They wanted, you couldn't get the door open to try and get her out to see if we got that heavy dash off her, and I know you are not supposed to move someone when they're injured, but in this instance, gasoline was leaking and they were really close to the side of the road, so nobody really wanted to leave her in there, and they wanted to try and get her out.
Yeah.
And all this time we're still waiting for the ambulance. So somebody finally finds a stick and a board, and they're trying to get the door open so that we can get to her.
Yeah.
And eventually fire and rescue, EMS, the police, they showed up, and they were able to pry open the door and get to her. And one of the paramedics had said, she has a pulse, but it is very faint.
Oh my gosh.
So
did you ever see if she survived or not?
She did not survive. And it turns out that mom's friend, it was his parents.
Oh my gosh. It was mom's friends?
It was mom's friend's parents.
Oh my gosh.
As it turns out, the husband, so the wife died. The husband went to the hospital. He had a broken ankle and he was standing outside.
Oh my gosh.
He had a bunch of broken stuff. He had to have a bag put on. I can't think of the name.
Not right now. Ostectomy? I can't say that word. Yeah, whatever.
Oh, it almost just came to me.
I guess not.
Anyhow, he had to have a bag The recovery process was extremely hard. But when I had pulled up to the car accident...
Colostomy.
Yes. When I had pulled up to the accident, I took a picture of the accident.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got home that day, I had told Mom about everything that was happened. I was extremely emotional because I had never had an experience like that before.
No.
And I talked to Mom about it. And then a few days later, Mom came to me and she's like, Kate, that's my friend's parents. She died. The dad is in horrible condition. They don't think he's going to make it.
Did he make it?
Only for a little bit.
Oh, so he passed too?
Yes.
Oh.
He, if I remember right, something else was broken, so he had to be in a wheelchair.
Oh, you know what? Maybe that was what he really wanted, was to go and be with her.
They didn't think he was going to survive because he was so,
that's
bad
so
with her
sad.
passing. So, but as it turns out, it ended up going to court because the guy who hit them, he worked the overnight shift at a company. Well, after overnight, they go to the bar and they booze it up. Because this was in the morning. This was at 10 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They would finish working night shift, go and booze it up, and then he got in the truck and he killed that woman, and then the husband eventually passed a little time later, so it went to court, and apparently the picture I had taken was used as huge evidence within the court case. And,
wow. Oh.
Yeah, and so Mom's friend had told her, you need to tell your daughter that your daughter's picture really helped our court case.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I'm such a big believer in, like, not necessarily that everything happens for a reason, because I think that's...
I believe that.
I do, but I don't, because sometimes it's unfair. It's unfair. And so you can't just be like, this happened. Like, I think of it like, this is a little off topic, but like for child deaths. And if a parent, to tell that to a parent who's lost a child, everything happens for a reason.
I would never tell that to a parent who's lost a child.
That's why I don't like that phrase, because I don't think that everything might happen for a reason, or maybe we don't realize it, or maybe down the road there might be something. But I think in life, random events can just happen, put you in a certain place. So tying it back into what you were talking about, maybe you were just in that place at that moment for that reason. Isn't that wild to think about?
It is. And, I think about different situations where, there's always a time and a place. And it's like, if this wouldn't have happened, it wouldn't have triggered all these different events in my life.
Yes.
Or people or experiences.
So why didn't you become a nurse?
No. Okay, one thing that's crazy, though, is after that accident, I remember considering maybe being a paramedic. Well, then I remembered I can't stomach anything.
Oh, that didn't happen. So tell them what you are now.
So I'm a paralegal.
Nothing to do with dead bodies or anything gory or anything. No, nothing.
But basically, a paralegal helps an attorney or company in any way they possibly can. Basically, an attorney's assistant and go-to person for anything they could possibly need. And you just can't sign. You can't give legal advice if you need to file stuff.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. Since this is my first podcast episode, I had done a little reach out to my followers and asked them if they would provide me with some questions that they have that they are dying to know. And Caitlyn, my lovely assistant, has those questions for me. So why don't you hit me with your best shot?
Okay. I'm a little
nervous.
We talked about this. You mentioned something briefly before we started this, but I think this is pretty good to ask because you're a mortician. Mm-hmm. And you said before we started, you're not 100% certain what you want to be done when you pass. So this user, Mama TR33, said, what are your plans for your own eventual remains?
Oh my, you literally just answered the question before that I didn't know. I like to say, or I definitely know that funerals are more for the living than they are for the dead. We definitely honor that person's life and we come together and we celebrate that life. But if I died tragically really young, I would just leave that decision up to my husband and my parents, I think, of what they really, really want. I mean, if you guys needed to see my body one more time and have that moment with me to say goodbye, then I would never want to deny somebody that if they needed that for closure. I don't really want to be embalmed, but I mean, if it came down to it and we needed that, I wouldn't haunt somebody if he decided to do that to me. But I do know that I don't want to be cremated. I think I've just cremated so many people that it's just not something that I want for myself. I really like the human composting idea, or like a natural green burial. Yeah, Dad hates the composting. Our dad's a little old school. He's not into the new trending things, which is human composting. But I do really like that, and I think that's pretty neat. So I'm pretty open. I kind of go back and forth on what I would really want.
See, and I would be open to cremation just because I don't know if I want my meat suit just sitting in the ground somewhere.
Well, if you do a green burial, we just wrap the body in like a sheet and like a biodegradable casket, or just put your body right in the ground. And then you just go back to,
back to the earth.
Yeah. So are you kind of like about bugs are kind of a natural part of everything. I mean,
if I were to do that, I would want that ocean one that you made a video about a long time ago.
You want me to throw you in the ocean?
Yeah. Or cremate me and like then cremate me, then throw my remains in the ocean so I could be with a fish.
Okay. I can handle that.
Okay.
What else do you got?
Kimberly wants to know, how do you find peace with death? I'm terrified of dying.
You know what's so interesting is when you work around death and when you grow up around it, or when it's just a normal part of life, you accept it for yourself more freely, I think I would say. And I don't know if I ever will have the best answer to this question, but what has brought me peace is knowing what happens after we die. And I think death has just become such a taboo topic that people don't talk enough about it. So that's what makes it more scary. Now, I'm not looking forward to the act of dying. I mean, dying, no matter which way you slice it, it's not going to be, for some people, it's a peaceful experience when we die, but for others, it's not. So that, I guess I can see why that would be scary, because none of us, we're all going to die. That's one of those things that really unites all of us, is we're all going to die one day. But I think I find peace in talking about these things with you, my followers, with you, with anybody that really wants to listen, brings me a whole bunch of peace in knowing that our time here is so limited. Because I think in accepting the fact that we're all going to die, what it does is it changes your brain and the way that it functions, and knowing that our time here is so limited and how special that time is together.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons why I decided to stay home with my kids, was because when you are around death so much, it really teaches you how important it is to live. And so, as you know, we sold everything and bought a smaller home so that we could downsize, and I could do that. Because when I was working full time, I was the main breadwinner, and it was a big lifestyle change. But I think just talking about this, normalizing it, and discussing it is going to be something that other people will find more peace in accepting it maybe one day.
Right. And I agree with what you say about, because where death eventually leads. So it's not necessarily the fear of where you'll end up. It's that fear of, okay, sure, I'm afraid to know how I might die.
Yeah, nobody really wants to die.
And one thing I would like to add to this is, a few weeks ago, I read a book, and it is incredible. It's called Signs, and let me look. I don't remember.
Oh, I think you told me about that book.
Yes. So it's by Laura Lene Jackson. The book is amazing. I would highly suggest the book if you know anyone who is grieving the loss of anyone, child, husband, grandparent, significant other of any kind. I would highly suggest this book. It's written by a psychic medium, and in the book, she talks about people who have passed away and how they will send us all these signs, but we don't realize they're signs. We think they're just coincidences, but it's just shows that even though our loved ones have passed, they could still communicate with us, but in a different way. Now, some people, you might think that's crazy, but if you're open-minded to the idea, I would highly suggest reading the book. It's very informative, and in the book, there's parts where it talks about people who almost passed, and they talk about how beautiful the other side is. That's what they refer to it as in the book, is the other side. And they're like, you wouldn't believe what it's like over there. Like, it's just the most beautiful, peaceful. It's all about love over there. That's it.
Okay, I'm going to have to read the book now.
Yes, and we will link it in the show notes so that you could take a look at it. But there's several books that are like that talk about people who have had near-death experiences. And they're like, it was so beautiful, I didn't want to come back, but I knew I had to come back.
Oh, we're going to have to talk about ghost stories in the next one.
Yes.
Because that's really moving and really special.
Another question. Do you think we have time?
I think this will be our last question.
When I die, I have informed my husband and my son they are not to pick up my remains. Who needs it? Not me, not them. Too much money anyway. What I want to know is that legal? Is it okay? What happens if my family refuses to pick it up? Not that I care about my body, but I just don't want them getting in trouble.
Okay, so that's a very long question, a very loaded question. If you don't want to pay a funeral home for your services, please sign up to donate your body somewhere so it can be used, like, usefully.
For science.
You definitely need to pre-register ahead of time to do that. We do have people at the funeral home that go unclaimed. We have people that don't get picked up. You picked a deep question for the last one.
I know.
We'll just have shelves at the funeral home where people will hang out forever until eventually we do something with them and they're just unclaimed. So people don't have to pick up their loved ones, but we as the funeral home do have to make attempts to contact the family and get it all in writing before we go to bury them. But for a lot of funeral homes, they just sit on the shelf in case they ever do show up one day. And on that depressing note, that is the end of our first podcast here. And what a whirlwind. We went like so many different, started out.
I know. I can't believe I got emotional.
We almost cried. We talked about death, our own death experience, some ghost experiences. This was wild and just such a great first episode. Mm-hmm. So we will be tuning in, or we will be doing this again. Yes. And I'm excited to do it again. So thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you for subscribing. Bye-bye.